My name is Elena Foster, and I used to believe that truth was something solid, something you could hold in your hands like a stone. I was wrong. Truth can be buried, twisted, rewritten, especially when it threatens the wrong people. It all began on a cold Thursday in February, the kind of gray afternoon where the sky presses low and everything feels like it's waiting to collapse. I was standing in the front lobby of Briarwood Assisted Living Facility, waiting to meet the woman who would change my life forever. Her name was Evelyn Whitmore, 92 years old, no known relatives. Formerly a wealthy philanthropist with ties to half the major art museums in the country. And now just another old woman whose mind was supposedly slipping. I was her newly appointed guardian, more accurately, a temporary court-assigned advocate assigned to ensure her affairs were in order after reports of possible elder abuse. I didn't expect much. I'd handled a dozen of these cases already that year. But the moment I walked into her room, I felt it. That electric low-level buzz of something not being right. She sat in a high-back chair by the window, her back straight, white hair pulled into a severe twist, and those blue eyes, the same color as glacier, water watching me with unsettling clarity. "You're not like the others," Shay said before I even introduced myself. Others. The ones they send to sign the papers to shut me up. I paused, slowly taking a seat across from her. "I'm here to protect your interests, Mrs. Whitmore." "They want my money," she said simply, as if we were discussing the weather. "All of them. And they'll do anything to get it." "Who?" I asked. She leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. "My niece. Her husband. Even the staff. But the worst ones? They're the ones you can't see. It's the ones in charge of the trust." I tried to keep my expression neutral. Delusions, paranoia, common signs of age-related cognitive decline. That's what the file said, but then she said something that made my breath catch. "There's a ledger. It's hidden in the cellar of my old estate, inside the grandfather clock. They don't know I made a copy. Find it, and you'll understand." 3 days later, I stood at the gates of Whitmore Hall, a crumbling mansion on the edge of town set behind iron fences and rows of dying trees. Evelyn's estate, abandoned after she was moved into care. It was raining, of course, the kind of rain that soaks through your coat and leaves you shivering all the way to your spine. The caretaker, a man named Harris, met me at the door. He was tall, with skin like old leather and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. "You're the girl Evelyn sent?" he asked, not bothering to hide his suspicion. "She didn't send me. The court did. Same difference." He led me inside without another word. The place smelled of mildew and old paper. Dust coated everything like a shroud. I asked to see the clock. "You can't get to it. The cellar's locked, then unlock it." His lip curled into something resembling a smile. "Don't have the key." That night I returned with bolt cutters. The cellar was darker than night. I used my phone's flashlight to guide the way, brushing aside cobwebs and broken furniture until I saw it, the massive oak grandfather clock standing like a sentinel in the far corner. It took me an hour to find the hidden compartment behind the pendulum. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle, filled with row after row of handwritten entries. Donations, transfers, withdrawals. Millions of dollars funneled through charities Evelyn supposedly funded, only to vanish into shell accounts. It was fraud. Massive, calculated fraud. Someone had been bleeding her fortune for years. And then I saw the names. Whitmore. Foundation Executive Board. Chair Henry Langston. Treasurer Rebecca Langston. Legal advisor Thomas Brenner. I froze. Thomas Brenner was my boss, a senior partner at the firm where I'd just made junior associate. He had personally assigned me to Evelyn's case. And suddenly, everything shifted. This wasn't about a confused old woman and a greedy niece. This was about a cover-up, one that ran all the way through the firm I worked for. I copied everything, scanned the pages, and uploaded them to a secure cloud folder I kept for sensitive cases. I didn't trust emails. Not anymore. It's not after what came next. The next morning, my apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, at least. Not obviously. My computer was wiped clean. My backup drive gone. But I'd planned for that. I had copies hidden in a separate encrypted account only I could access. I didn't report the break-in. I knew the police wouldn't help. Not if Thomas Brenner was involved. Instead, I went back to see Evelyn. "They know I found it," I told her. She smiled faintly, like she'd been expecting it. "They're afraid now." "That's good. Why me?" I asked. "Why trust me with this?" "It's because you still believe people should pay for what they've done." I didn't sleep that night or the night after. I started seeing strange cars parked outside my building. My phone would ring once and disconnect. I knew I was being watched, but I also knew I couldn't walk away. Not now. The next step was clear. I needed help. Not from anyone in my firm, not from the authorities I knew were already compromised, but from someone outside the system. I called Jonah Carver. Jonah was a former investigative journalist turned private researcher, the kind of man who dug into dark places and made powerful people squirm. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I helped him with a custody case during my internship, but I remembered his sharp mind and sharper instincts. If anyone could help me make sense of the ledger, it was him. I met him at a diner on the edge of town neutral ground, one he picked with greasy eggs and worse coffee. He looked older than I remembered, a little more cynical around the eyes. "You always call me when things are on fire," he said, sliding into the booth. "That's because you're good at putting them out," I replied, handing him a USB drive with the scanned documents. He scrolled through them on his battered laptop, his face shifting from curiosity to disbelief to fury. "Jesus, Elena. This is a damn fortune, and it's not just stolen, it's laundered. It's been washing. Money through children's hospitals, veteran programs, arts grants. Looks clean from the outside, but these accounts," he tapped the screen, "they're empty." The money was rerouted to a series of LLCs based out of the Caymans, shell companies, all linked back to the same three names. "The Langstons and Brenner," I said. Jonah nodded grimly. "And if they've been doing this for as long as this ledger shows, we're talking about hundreds of millions." I leaned back, trying to swallow the enormity of it. It wasn't just fraud. It was theft on a scale most people couldn't even imagine. "What now?" I asked. He gave me a long look. "You sure you want to do this? Once we go public, they'll come after you hard. These aren't just white-collar crooks. They have reach, influence. You'll lose your job. Maybe. More I know," I said quietly. But what I didn't tell him was how afraid I already was. The first real blow came 2 days later. A formal complaint was filed against me at the firm. Professional misconduct, they called it. An anonymous tip suggested I'd been manipulating my elderly client into making false claims, that I'd forged the documents to gain access to Evelyn's finances. I was suspended immediately. No warning, no hearing. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I didn't even get to clear out my desk. Security escorted me out the front door like I was a criminal. But as I stood on the sidewalk outside Brenner and Locke, clutching my handbag and the growing knot of fury in my chest, I realized something vital. They were scared. If they weren't, they wouldn't be trying this hard to destroy me. That night, Jonah called with an update. I traced one of the shell company's Merivale Trust holdings. It's a front, but the building it's registered under is owned by a Langston Holdings subsidiary. It's the same company that's been donating millions to Whitmore's charities. He paused. "Elena, they've been using Evelyn's name and reputation to launder dirty money. Every donation she supposedly made after 2014, not her. Her signature was forged or coerced." I thought of Evelyn sitting upright in that sterile room, blue eyes burning with truth no one wanted to hear. She hadn't just been silenced. She'd been erased. "Can we prove that?" I asked. Jonah exhaled. "I'm working on it. But we'll need more than just scans. We need originals, paper trails, bank statements. And Idela Evelyn herself. I swallowed. She's coherent. They just don't want her to be. Then we get her somewhere safe. Interview her on video, record everything. That night, I barely slept. I kept picturing Evelyn, alone in that place, surrounded by staff who may have been bought or threatened. If they found out she'd talked, she could be in danger. So the next morning, I did something reckless. I took Evelyn out of Briarwood. Not illegally. I used the legal authority I still had technically valid, pending the court's final review, to sign her out for medical observation. I claimed I was taking her to a geriatric specialist for a second opinion. The nurse didn't question it. The staff had likely been told not to cause waves, as I helped Evelyn into the passenger seat of my car. She turned to me and smiled faintly. "You're doing it, aren't you?" she said. "Doing what?" "It's pulling the thread. The one that unravels everything." We took her to Jonah's apartment, more secure than mine and off the radar. He had already set up camera equipment, a soft-lit backdrop, and even tea. "You came prepared." I said, "You're not the only one who used to believe in the system." He replied, "We interviewed Evelyn for 3 hours. She spoke clearly, methodically, laying out dates, conversations, threats. She detailed how Henry Langston had approached her after her husband's death, offering to manage her charitable efforts through a new foundation. How they convinced her to sign over certain rights with promises of efficiency and transparency. She hadn't questioned ETA at first. Then money started vanishing. Friends on her advisory board were removed quietly, and even died under suspicious circumstances. They said I was forgetting things, Evelyn said, looking directly into the camera. They said I was old and confused. I remember everything. She described the threats, the sudden changes to her medication, the evaluations that claimed she was in early dementia. It was textbook gaslighting. And behind it all, Langston, Rebecca, and Brenner. "We need to get this to the media," Jonah said when the camera stopped rolling. "No," Evelyn said. "Not yet." "Why not?" I asked, confused. She looked at me with icy determination. "Because if we show our hand too early, they'll bury us." Over the next 2 days, we moved with quiet urgency. Jonah edited the footage of Evelyn's testimony, backing it up in multiple encrypted locations and drafting a report that combined her interview, financial records, and analysis of the fraudulent donations. It was compelling, but it still needed one thing: legal teeth. That's when I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to since law school, Lana Ruiz. She was now an assistant. Us attorney with a reputation for biting down on white-collar crime and not letting go. We'd studied together, competed for moot court awards, and occasionally shared late-night coffees when the world felt too heavy. We hadn't left things on bad terms, just drifted apart. But when I texted her that I had information about a large-scale charity fraud involving a prominent legal firm and a public foundation, she replied in under a minute, "Meet me tonight." We met at a quiet cafe on the south side of the city. Alana arrived in a trench coat, her hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes sharp and unreadable. "You look like someone who just found out Santa's a money launderer," she said, sliding into the booth. "You might wish it were that innocent." I replied. I handed her a tablet preloaded with our files and waited as she scrolled in silence. Her lips moved slightly as she read, her brow furrowed deeper with every page. After 10 minutes, she set the tablet down. "This is big," she said quietly, "and dangerous. You know that, right?" I was suspended from my firm, framed for elder exploitation, and I've been followed. "So yeah, I'm aware." Alana exhaled slowly. "The Langstons have friends in high places. Senators, judges. If we go after them, it can't be half measures. We'll need federal subpoenas, court orders, whistleblower protections, and time." "Evelyn doesn't have much of that." I said. "Neither do I. I'll take this up the ladder," she promised. "But you need to keep your head down until I move." No more poking the bear. I nodded. But we both knew that Bear had already seen me. That night, as Jonah and I drove Evelyn back to his apartment, a car followed us. We tried to lose it taking turns, doubling back, but it stayed just close enough to keep us in sight. Jonah finally pulled into a grocery store parking lot and killed the lights. We waited. Nothing. "I don't like this," he muttered. I reached for my phone to text Elena. But before I could type a word, Evelyn spoke from the back seat. "There. Warning you." "What? That car?" "That's not a threat, it's a message. They're letting you know they see you, that they're watching." Jonah turned around. "Have you seen that car before?" She nodded, her voice a thin whisper. "Many times. At the facility, parked outside my window at night. They want to make you doubt, make you scared." It was working the next morning. Evelyn didn't wake up. I found her lying peacefully in the guest bedroom. Her eyes closed, her hands folded over her chest like she was posing for a photograph she hadn't agreed to take. For a moment, I hoped she was just sleeping, but her skin was cold and her lips had the faintest trace of blue. "No," I whispered, shaking her gently. "No, Evelyn, please." Jonah came running at my scream. He called 911 while I checked for a pulse I already knew wasn't there. Paramedics arrived minutes later, performed all the motions they had to, and pronounced her dead just after 8 a.m. natural causes. The lead EMT said, noting her age. But I knew better. Evelyn hadn't been sick. She'd been clear-headed, stable, lucid. Her death wasn't sudden, it was strategic. They had silenced her. Elena came straight from her office when I called. She examined the scene with quiet intensity, but even she admitted that getting an autopsy ordered would be difficult. She was 92. They'll call it cardiac arrest unless there's obvious trauma. "Then we get the toxicology," I insisted. Jonah agreed. If they poisoned her, it might still be in her system. But I could see the doubt flicker. In Elena's eyes, the window was closing. Fast. That night, grief hit me like a freight train. I sat in Evelyn's room, clutching the scarf she'd worn during our last interview. It still smelled faintly of rosewater. I couldn't stop replaying her final words to me, the way she'd said them with such quiet certainty. "They'll come for you, too." And I realized she hadn't just been trying to expose the truth. She had been trying to protect me from what would happen when we did. 2 days after Evelyn's death, Jonah called me at 2 a.m. "I just got a hit on one of the shell companies. You're not going to believe this." I was already awake. Didn't let me sleep anymore. "Go on." There's a company called Whitmore Equity. It owns several properties in New York, but on paper, it's managed by a firm in D.C. That firm? It's run by Henry Langston's college roommate. But here's the kicker. Guess what the most recent property acquisition was? What? The Briarwood Assisted Living Facility. Purchased 3 months ago under a different shell name. But same address, same staff. Langston's been controlling the place. My blood ran cold. You mean he didn't just want to hide Evelyn? He wanted to control her care. The doctors, the medications, the evaluations. It was all part of the setup. He paused, then added quietly, "I think Evelyn knew. That's why she trusted you. You weren't part of any system they owned." Felt hollow, like something vital inside me had been stripped away. "I'm going to bury him for this," I said, voice trembling. "I know." Jonah replied, "That morning I filed a formal motion to reopen Evelyn's case in probate court. Despite her death, I cited evidence of undue influence, financial manipulation, and possible foul play." Elena worked behind the scenes, preparing to freeze the Whitmore Foundation's assets pending investigation. But someone got wind of it by evening. News broke across 3 major outlets that I was under investigation for elder fraud and obstruction of justice. My name was plastered across headlines. My bar license was suddenly under review. The smear campaign had begun. "You've got one." "Shot now," Elena warned me. "Either go public with what you've got or you'll be buried under noise." Jonah uploaded Evelyn's testimony to a secure platform. We wrote a public statement together. Then I hit send to every major investigative journalist, ethics board, nonprofit watchdog, and congressional staffer I could think of. Within hours, Evelyn's voice was everywhere. And for the first time, the silence felt breakable. The media storm hit like a hurricane. By noon the next day, Evelyn's video was the lead story on 3 major networks and a trending topic online. Clips of her calm, unwavering voice filled television screens, tablets, and phones across the country. They said I was confused, that I was imagining things. But I remember everything. Every lie, every stolen dollar. Every time they tried to shut me up. For a woman the world had forgotten, Evelyn became a fire no one could ignore. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Reporters began digging. Journalists uncovered connections between the Whitmore Foundation and a tangled web of shell companies echoing everything Jonah had discovered. Property records, political donations, memos leaked by an anonymous source, Elena, I suspected showed that the firm had used Evelyn's name to backdoor millions in untraceable funds to high-powered donors and allies. The Langstons released a statement denying all accusations. They called Evelyn a beloved relative suffering from cognitive decline and painted me as an opportunistic young attorney exploiting a vulnerable elder. But it was too late. The truth had legs on. It was sprinting. 3 days later, the FBI raided the Whitmore Foundation's headquarters in Midtown. Jonah and I watched the footage from his laptop as agents carried out boxes of records, computers, hard drives, even artwork. "That's a Monet," Jonah muttered. They were hiding stolen art too. Nothing would surprise me anymore. Then came the knock at the door. For a moment, we both froze. No one knew we were here, but when I opened it, Michael Whitmore stood on the other side. Evelyn's great-nephew. We'd never met. But I recognized him from the photo in her bedroom taken back when he was 12. Evelyn's arm draped affectionately around his shoulder. Now he was a grown man, early 30s, slender, wire-rimmed glasses. A face that looked more haunted than aged. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Please." Jonah raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as I let him in. Michael sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "I saw the video," he began. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I said nothing, just watched." He swallowed. "My father, Evelyn's nephew, he died 10 years ago. I didn't think I had any stake in her life anymore. Then a few months ago, Rebecca Langston reached out to me. What did she want?" I asked. "She said Evelyn wanted to amend her will, that I was being reinstated as a beneficiary." That got my attention. They brought me to her room at Briarwood, but she didn't even recognize me, just stared at the window. I thought maybe she really was gone. Rebecca told me not to worry, that they were managing everything, and you signed. He nodded, shame coloring his cheeks. "Papers, lots of them. I didn't even read them. I thought I was doing what she wanted." My jaw clenched. "You handed them what they needed to complete the theft?" He looked up at me, tears brimming. "I know. And I want to make it right." Jonah crossed his arms, skeptical. "Why now?" "'Cause I saw the truth, and I realized I've been a coward." For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black journal. "This is Evelyn's. She used to write in it when I was a kid. She told me once, the truth needs its own space, or it gets buried under polite lies." He handed it to me. Inside, Evelyn's neat cursive filled every page. Notes, dates, conversations, sketches of signatures. Her private record of everything they'd done to her hand, how they did it. "This is the last piece," Jonah whispered, eyes scanning the pages. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony of Jonah's apartment with the journal in my lap, reading Evelyn's words by the light of the moon. One entry stopped me cold. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But that's okay. I never expected to survive this war, only to make sure someone else saw the battlefield. I chose you, Lena, because you still believe the law can serve people, not just power. Don't let them twist that belief. Don't let them twist you. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. My breath caught on a sob I hadn't meant to release. She had known all of it. The danger, the price, the weight, and she still handed it to me by week's end. Indictments were issued. Henry Langston was arrested on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. His wife Rebecca faced similar charges along with evidence of witness tampering. Thomas Brenner was disbarred pending a formal trial and arrested for conspiracy and aiding in the cover-up.briarwood. Single quotes license was revoked. Its administrators were investigated. Multiple families came forward with claims of similar abuses toward other residents. Evelyn had opened to dam her voice, carrying those behind her into the light. But justice, even when it finally arrives, doesn't feel like a clean victory. Evelyn was gone, and with her, the chance to tell her, you were right. I heard you. I believed you. I fought like hell because you were worth it. 1 month after the indictments, I stood on a hill overlooking the Whitmore family cemetery. The wind was crisp, the air clear. A simple headstone had been placed at Evelyn's request, inscribed with her chosen epitaph. She remembered everything. I knelt beside her grave and placed a single daffodil on the stone. You changed the world, I whispered, and now it's my turn to protect it. Behind me, Jonah waited quietly. Michael stood beside him, his hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the sky, as I stood. I felt the weight of everything Evelyn had endured, everything she had. Given it was my story now, and I would carry it forward. In the months that followed Evelyn's story breaking, my life unraveled and rebuilt itself in unexpected ways. The Bar Review Board dismissed the complaints against me. They didn't apologize. Of course, institutions rarely do, but the silence of their withdrawal said enough. The firm, Brenner and Locke, crumbled almost overnight. Clients vanished. Partners fled, and Brenner himself sat in a holding cell, awaiting a trial that promised to be one of the most closely watched financial crimes cases in recent years. But justice wasn't a clean line. It wasn't a Hollywood climax with slow applause and a swelling score. It was messy, bitter, and slow. For every inch we gained, they threw another obstacle at new legal motions. Character attacks, endless PR campaigns to discredit Evelyn's memory. They underestimated us. We were relentless. Jonah published a full expose on his old platform. The Quiet Ledger, now revived and thriving thanks to public demand for the truth. His article, The Heiress, The Ledger, and the Lie, was shared over 6 million times in 2 weeks. It earned him death threats and a Pulitzer nomination. Elena, now promoted and assigned to the Financial Crimes Division, used the Whitmore case to push for stronger protections for elder financial abuse victims. She gave testimony before Congress. Her voice never wavered once. And me. I started something new. I called it the Whitmore Project, a legal initiative dedicated to investigating elder fraud, institutional abuse, and medical coercion. We began as a 2-person team, myself and a paralegal named Rosalie, who had once worked as a nurse at Briarwood and had resigned after witnessing things she'd been told not to question now. We had 6 lawyers, 4 investigators, and a growing caseload of clients whose stories echoed Evelyn's in heartbreaking ways. Some nights I sat alone in my new office, a small, sunlit room downtown with peeling wallpaper and uneven floors, and wondered how I got here. How? I went from junior associate in a soulless firm to public advocate for people who had no one left, and always. Evelyn's voice would echo in my mind. They said I was confused, but I remember everything. One case stuck with me. An elderly man named Jerome Parks, a former professor, 90 years old, diagnosed with rapid cognitive decline and placed under the care of a private guardian. But there were anomalies, bank withdrawals he hadn't authorized, a house sold without his knowledge, and a medical regimen that included 3 sedatives daily. Sound familiar? His daughter Maya had contacted the Whitmore Project after seeing Evelyn's story. Her voice trembled as she explained how her father had always been sharp, witty, full of life until suddenly he wasn't. We visited Jerome in the facility where he was being held. He didn't recognize his own daughter until I said one word, Ledger. His eyes lit up like candles in the dark. That was the moment I knew Evelyn's story wasn't a one-off. It was the tip of something far larger. A system of legal exploitation cloaked in paperwork and polite euphemisms, and it was my job now to tear it apart. Jonah and Tuesday, I still talked nearly every day. He refused to admit it, but he was the emotional compass I didn't know I needed. He knew when to push me, when to distract me, and when to just sit in silence and let the grief pass like a storm. One evening, we sat in his apartment watching a documentary on whistleblowers. The final segment featured Evelyn. Archival footage. Interviews. Her voice, again. Jonah turned to me as the credits rolled. You ever think about walking away? Letting someone else pick up the torch? I thought about it. Thought about the fear, the fatigue, the isolation. And then I shook my head. No, I said, because this isn't a torch. It's a fuse. And it's already burning. He smiled. Faintly, spoken like someone who doesn't know how to rest. Spoken like someone who saw a woman try to scream the truth for 10 years and get ignored. I won't be the one who forgets. Michael stayed in touch. Not often, not always. With words. But I would get postcards quiet. Handwritten notes with sketches of places he and Evelyn had visited when he was a child. A park bench in New York. A painting in a museum. A wildflower field in Vermont. No signature. Just one phrase at the bottom. Of each card, she remembered everything. And I did too, every lie, every truth. Every moment in that cold room when I almost didn't believe her. The truth is, I was changed by her. Not just by the war we fought together, but by her dignity, her stillness in the face of erasure, her refusal to go quietly. She reminded me of who I wanted to be when I first picked up a law book, not someone who chased money or titles, but someone who stood between the wolves and the door. And now, finally, I was. 6 months after the trials began, I returned to Whitmore Hall. It was abandoned now, windows boarded, the gardens wild. But I had gotten special permission from the court to enter the property. The Whitmore estate was being liquidated to fund restitution for the victims. And the Whitmore Project had been asked to advise. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and memories. I walked down to the cellar, to the clock. It was still there. I opened the hidden compartment. Empty now, of course. But as I stood there, I ran my fingers along the wood and thought of Evelyn placing that ledger inside, knowing it might be her only voice after death. And I said aloud, to no one, I found it. I saw it, and I told the world. When I emerged, the sun had begun to set. The estate bathed in gold, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because justice had been served completely, but because silence hadn't won. Because the quietest voice in the room had finally been heard. The 1-year anniversary of Evelyn's death arrived on a rainy April morning. I found myself awake at 5 a.m., watching the city stir to life from the window of my apartment. Below, cars hissed along the wet pavement. Umbrellas bloomed like black flowers against the rising light. I hadn't planned anything, but something in me needed to mark the day. So I took the train north to Ars, out of the city, to a small chapel nestled on a wooded hilltop just outside Havencrest, where Evelyn was buried. There were no other visitors, no marble angels or ornate tributes, just her simple stone, clean and steadfast. She remembered everything. I knelt beside it and laid down a letter. One I'd written in the still hours between casework and exhaustion. It said the things I hadn't gotten to say before. Evelyn, I didn't know how brave you were until I saw how deeply they tried to silence you. I didn't know how powerful truth could be until I watched you give it away, knowing it might cost you everything. We won't forget. I won't forget. You trusted me when you had every reason not to. And I promise, no one will bury voices like yours again. Not while I have breath left to fight. I folded the letter and slipped it into the flower vase by her grave. Rain kissed the stone. A gust of wind stirred the pines around us. And for a moment, I could have sworn I felt her there, watching, smiling, free. Back in the city, the Whitmore project had grown faster than I ever imagined. We'd moved into a modest 3-floor brownstone donated by a grateful client. Inside were old rugs, crooked staircases, desks that creaked, but the place was alive. With energy, our intake had tripled in 6 months. Elder fraud cases, medical coercion, predatory guardianships. One case involved a tech billionaire's mother, signed into a private facility where she'd been drugged into submission while her assets were restructured to fund a fake startup. Another was a quiet veteran in Minnesota, whose neighbor uncovered financial documents showing over $500,000 siphoned from his pension. We were fighting giants, banks, trust firms, medical networks. But Evelyn had taught us that paper trails don't lie, and that the most dangerous people are often the ones with clipboards, clean records, and polite smiles. Jonah's investigations were now syndicated to national outlets. He'd become the reluctant face of a new movement, investigative watchdog journalism that didn't stop at publication, but partnered with legal advocacy to follow the thread through the courts. Elena had joined a federal task force on fiduciary fraud. Her speeches before congressional committees were sharp, scathing, and unforgettable everywhere. The ripples of Evelyn's story were being felt, and yet, with every victory, we found new walls, loopholes, quiet settlements. Judges whose campaign donations matched the institutions we were up against. Sometimes I'd come home from a 14-hour day, peel off my heels, and sit on the floor asking myself if we were even making a dent. Then I'd check our inbox, and there it would be a message from someone in Ohio, or Arizona, or Ireland. I saw Evelyn's video. I think the same thing's happening to my mother. Can you help me? I believe you. And that, more than money, recognition or legal wins was what mattered. People believed because of Evelyn, because she remembered. 6 weeks later, I stood outside a courthouse in D.C., preparing to testify before a federal oversight committee on legal reforms for elder protection. The room was lined with men in gray suits and women in pearls. The air was heavy with bureaucracy and the unspoken weight of industries built on silence. I sat beside Jonah and a retired probate judge who had once helped write the very policies we were trying to dismantle. When they asked me why this mattered, I didn't quote statistics. I told them about Evelyn, about the way she sat in a nursing home chair with perfect posture and a mind sharp enough to gut a billion-dollar fraud ring. I told them about the ledger hidden behind her clock, the emails, the cameras, the pills, the way she whispered, "They want my money. Please help me," and how no one else had listened until she found someone who did. I finished with the line engraved on her grave. She remembered everything. The room went silent, and for once, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous, because stories like Evelyn's weren't rare. They were everywhere, hiding behind polite facades and legal jargon. And now they had a voice, a year and a half after her death. The Whitmore Project hosted its first national conference. We called it Remember Everything. Not because of Evelyn alone, but because memory is a form of resistance. Because refusing to forget what they try to erase is the first step toward justice. The opening night was standing room. Lawyers, journalists, survivors, whistleblowers. Michael came. He didn't speak, but I saw him in the crowd, eyes shining, with something like peace. He'd left the city, taken a job at a public school in Oregon, and written a children's book based on the stories Evelyn used to tell him. Jonah introduced me from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the woman who lit the match under a house of silence, Elena Foster." I stepped up to the podium and scanned the crowd. So many faces, so many truths waiting to be spoken, and I said only one thing to start. I was not the first to fight this, but I refused to be the last. Sometimes at night, when the city is quiet and the world feels less sharp, I lie in bed and think of Evelyn. I imagine her younger, walking the halls of Whitmore Hall in heels and silk, laughter in her throat and secrets in her smile. I imagine her older, staring out that window at Briarwood, wondering if anyone would ever see past the mask they'd placed on her. And I imagine her now free, finally heard. The world didn't believe her at first, but it does now, and it always will, because she remembered everything, and now, so do we.